Hey everyone, and thanks for joining today's workshop. In today's workshop, we're going to cover competitive landscape analysis. This is part of Produthon, and you're hopefully going to be able to use a lot of this stuff in today's weekend, in the competition weekend. But it's also going to be useful for after the weekend whenever you're thinking of understanding how customers currently solve a problem and what kind of solutions they look at to solve that problem and how they evaluate those solutions, aka those competitors. Okay, so let's dive in. I want to start by showing an overall competitive map of the remote workspace. The first thing that came to mind as I was going through founding a company was sort of like this feeling of being dissuaded when I saw the competitors in my space. I essentially kept thinking, how am I supposed to compete with these guys? Is there any point in me building something in this market when there's other competitors in it? But one thing that I realized as I was going through my research and founding a company was that, number one, the market is extremely big. So for example, this remote work market map, I found somewhere that companies lose about 600 billion a year on employees being unproductive when they're working in the office. So what that tells me is there's roughly $600 billion worth of revenue per year that companies can capture if they solve remote work completely. There's not even 100 companies on this slide. So each company could be doing 6 billion a year in revenue if they solve that problem, if they solve 1/100th of that problem. So hopefully what you take away from this is that there's always going to be competitors. Having competitors is also a good thing, because it validates that you're solving a problem that's valuable. And then finally, that the market is extremely big, and you will be capturing market share either from your competitors or from, if it's a growing market, you might be that first company in there that your customers have not considered any competitors just yet. Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about myself, and then we can dive into more of this workshop. So I also was a solder student or a UBC student. I graduated in 2014. I spent the last 5 years doing product management. I worked at a bunch of different companies, from big ones like Deloitte and PwC down to newer startups like Cabo or Filament AI. And I actually started my career as an auditor working at PwC. So after I graduated solder, I moved into auditing. I moved out to Toronto. And then I was able to jump into, or crack into, the PM space, as they say, by transitioning into an audit and accounting software company called Casework. And the reason that they wanted to bring me on there was because I had that customer insight. I used to be essentially a former customer of theirs. So for those thinking about jumping into PM, that might be one route. But yeah, from there I moved into being a PM consultant, helping multiple companies go through everything from 0 to 1, so taking them from idea through to product market fit, and then most recently founded a company. It was actually in that last experience founding a company that I did a ton of competitive analysis, and hopefully I can share some of those relevant things with you today. So our agenda for today's call is essentially, we're going to break us into three different sections rather. We're going to start with some context on why competitive analysis is important and how it fits into your competition weekend. Then we'll jump into the theory and understand what is competitive analysis. But these two sections won't take as much time. We're going to spend most of our time in the meat of the presentation will be focused on the practical side of things. So looking at examples and use cases, we'll jump into a Miro whiteboard together where we can collaborate. And in there, we'll actually walk through and perform competitive analysis across 4 different dimensions. Top-down market sizing, bottoms-up market sizing, value analysis, and then feature comparison. Okay, so with that, let's jump into where we are on the weekend and why we need to do some competitive analysis. So competitive analysis will help you understand how your product differentiates from competition out there and how it fits into the market, as in how it's positioned in the eyes of your buyers. Also, another thing to keep in mind as well is that when you go out and after you graduate and either join companies or found companies, competitor analysis will help you understand how your users or your buyers or your customers think about solving the problem they're trying to solve. What's key about competitive analysis is understanding two things. So we want to look at, number one, does competitive analysis validate that this is an attractive problem to solve? So here I have a picture of someone, looks like they're in first place, but there's no one else on the other podiums. It's important that, well, one of the important things you'll take away from competitive analysis is that you can only really be the first place in a market if you're going to be beating other market players. So it does provide you validation that this is an attractive market to go after, because the logic is that if no one is competing for this market, then perhaps there's no money to be made in this market. Second of all, competitive analysis will give us that understanding of differentiation. So like, how are we going to be different and better than our competitors in a meaningful way that customers care about? Okay, so let's jump into the theory and talk about what is competitive analysis. Okay, so what is competitive analysis? We're going to cover two main ways of competitive analysis in today's workshop. First of all will be the higher level way, where we look at the overall market size. And the purpose of this is that validation that I mentioned before. So investors and employees that join the company are going to want to know that the market size that you go after is big and it's growing. So we'll cover how to do some research for your market size and what that looks like. Number two, we'll cover more on the detailed or lower level side, specific competitors and how they currently solve the problem that you're going after, looking at the values that they provide for their customers, and then more detailed, the features that they actually have, to figure out which of them that you need to have in your product versus which you don't, or as well as looking at how you can create some different features to really differentiate yourself. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what validation market sizing looks like. So with market sizing, we're going to cover two approaches, and we're going to do this in the Miro board in just a few minutes. We're going to look at a top-down approach, where you start with doing some research on the industry and seeing how big it is overall in dollar terms. So you want to understand how much revenue is being spent per year to solve this problem by all the customers in your market. That'll give you the total available market, which is called TAM. Next, we'll look at two other more narrowly defined options. We'll look at SAM, which is your serviceable addressable market, and then we'll look at SOM, which is your share of the market. So to make this super concrete, TAM for a task management software might be, call it 1 billion. That means the total amount spent by everyone in the market on task management software. SAM will be the market segment that you'll target. So maybe you're going to do task management software for construction companies. Now that's going to be just a smaller portion of that 1 billion. Maybe it's 100 million is done by construction companies. And then finally, SOM is a realistic number that you can actually capture. So this would be, for argument's sake, we can just call it 5% of that. So 5% of the 100 million. So 5 million is what you can aim to capture in revenue per year from selling your task management software to construction companies. Okay. Next up, we'll also look at bottoms-up analysis. So bottoms-up analysis is where you get some concrete data from asking customers in your target segment, how much are you currently spending to solve this problem? Then you want to extrapolate that out by figuring out how many other customers out there exist like them. And then you multiply the two figures together, and that gives you the number that you'll have. Okay. Next, we'll look at differentiation and value analysis. So with value analysis, what's important to understand is, what do your customers care about when looking for a solution to solve their problems? So an example over here on the right, it's actually from the company that I've founded over the last year. And we are looking at a data analysis tool for scientists to analyze their life sciences data to find new drugs. When we talk to scientists, what they told us is what's important to them in a data analysis solution is, number one, that it can handle big data, and number two, that they can use it without having to code. So these are the two values of which we then judged all the other competitors in our market where customers were using some of those solutions. And we judged them against on those two criteria to see how we stand out. So for example, when I look at those that can handle big data, if you can code and use R or Python, then that ranks really highly. But there's other solutions out there that don't handle big data, but they do a good job of not having you code. And that, for example, would be like Excel or GraphPad Prism. So we can, in a couple of minutes, we'll go through in the Miro board and we'll look at the same thing for the task management industry. And then you'll be able to apply this later on in your pitch. All right, so with that said, that's all the theory out of the way. Let's go jump into the Miro board, which I think the team is going to share with you in the chat. And we can jump in there and do this competitive analysis with each other and practice there. So click on here. You should be able to join Miro, and it might ask you to sign up or sign in. Okay, cool. I see that some people are already here. Good. I'll just give it a couple more seconds, wait for everyone to join. Do we have everyone?
I think we're just waiting for a few more people to join, but I think we can start going with the activity, Hirsch.
Okay, cool. Hey, and by the way, this is where, like, if anyone has any questions, either right now or as I go through, just let me know. I'll just double check the chat right now and see if there's any questions. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, so I want this part to be super interactive and engaging. So yeah, fire away if you have any questions. And what I'm going to do essentially is go through how to do something and then actually do it with you live here. And I'll ask for your help as I'm doing it. So for the use case that we're going to focus on today to really illustrate these concepts, we're going to focus on the task management software industry. I'm going to start by looking at how to do market sizing for task management from a top-down view first, then a bottoms-up. Then we'll move on to the value analysis, and then we'll finish with feature level analysis. And the outputs or the deliverables from each of these things is right below. So top down, you'll have your market size, TAM, SAM, SOM. Bottoms up, you'll get the amount spent per customer and the number of customers in the industry, and you multiply them together. For value analysis, we're going to have this axis here, the matrix, and we'll actually go and grab some logos and we'll put them on the matrix and we'll figure out how people think about different task management software companies and vendors. And then finally, we'll go to feature level and dive in and just rank task management software along a couple of features and see where you can differentiate. Okay, cool. So let's zoom in and start with the market sizing top down. So market size for the task management industry. What we want to do here is essentially just Google and research our way into finding what's the market size of the task management industry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to Google right now and see what it is, but I'd also like someone else to do it as well, so you can sense check the figure that you get against the figure that I get and see if they make sense. Okay, so let's go. So task management software market size. By the way, I cheated a little bit and looked this one up before, but let's see what I found. Here we go. So the first one here, Market Watch. Oh, I guess I can't use this. So this is what happens when you do things live. Okay, we can use Fortune Business Insights. Hopefully they give us something good. So what I want to do here is, number one, like figure out what the number is. So this one says that the task management software market size is 1.7 billion in 2018. And usually I'll go through and I'll pull it like 3 different sources just to make sure that what I'm seeing makes sense. So we have 1.7 billion. Did anyone find any other figure for the the market size for task management software?
Just 2.3 billion.
2.3 billion. Okay, cool. Thank
in
you.
2018, yeah.
In 2018. Right. Should say that here. So the 2018 figures, we have 1.7 to 2.3 billion. What I did when I was going through the process of founding the company was I pulled the same information from 3 or 4 different sources, and I compared them to see, like, does the figure make sense? Is it kind of like in the range, which would be reasonable? Also looking at the year, like you mentioned, 2018, and then also we want to look at the growth rate, which is really important. So here we see that it says it's projected to reach 4.5 billion by 2026, with a growth rate of 13.3% per year. So that's something that's really good to include in your pitch deck, because investors will want to know if the market's getting bigger, because that means more money is being obviously spent in this industry, and you can capture a percentage of that. Also, if the market size is growing, it means that they're looking for new solutions, and it's easier for you to capture someone that doesn't have an existing solution rather than someone who is already using a competitor and they would have to switch away from you. It could incur some switching costs. I wanted to copy that over. Give me a sec here. Okay, fine. Let's say, so projected to okay, cool. So that's the total available or total addressable market, right? So now what we want to do is grab the SAM and the SOM, and to make sure that we're not just throwing acronyms around and we know what they mean, let me pull that up again. So TAM was total available market. As we saw, the market size we have there is like 2 billion. SAM is serviceable addressable market. So the segment that we're going to target. So I guess here is where you want to, oops. So here's where you want to figure out your market segment that you're going after, and then you can estimate how much they represent of the total spend. To make it simple for this exercise, I'm not going to spend too much more time on going through the SAM, but what we can do is just a quick back of the envelope calculation. So we can say, if we want to focus on task management software for small companies versus medium-sized companies versus large and then enterprise, we can then, once again, using back of envelope calculations here, you could say that, okay, let's say 33% of the market is small companies. Just for argument's sake, I'll make it super easy. 33% is medium companies, and then 33% is large companies. Now, it's not actually going to be that, but for our sake, we'll just do that. So that means your SAM for the segment that you're targeting, which is small companies, is going to be 33% of, we'll do the $2.3 billion figure. 33% times 2.3. Okay, so 0.75, 0.76. So 0.76 billion is our SAM. Remove these other two here. Now, the last thing is SOM. And go back to our definition here. SOM is our share of the market. So what can we realistically capture? Once again, it's going to be estimates, because at this early stage, you don't really know what you can capture. So one methodology could be as simple as saying, I'll capture 5% of that SAM. So we'll take 5% of 0.76 billion, or 760 million times 0.05. So 38 million. Okay. 38 million. So that's a quick view or how to do top-down market sizing. If You have your total addressable market is 2.3 billion. You want to focus on the segment of small companies. We did some research and we found, let's say that by estimates, that 33% of the market was small companies versus medium and large. And then, so if we just target small companies, it gives us 0.76 billion if we sell to them. And then finally, we aim to capture realistically, let's just say 5%, and that's how you get your 38 million. So I ran through that pretty quickly. Does anyone, any questions before I go into the bottoms up market sizing? Does it make sense?
So we have a question here on the Slido.
Sure.
So someone asked, could you explain further on the way you derive SOM from SAM?
Sure. Okay, so the way I derive SOM from SAM, for this case, I essentially just took 5% of the SAM. And the reason being is you want to try and find a way to estimate how much you can capture of the market share. Now, that number, the 5% that I just took here, it's going to be based on the existing competitive landscape, how fragmented it is. So as in, does this market have 100 companies competing for the market share, or does it have like 10 companies competing for the market share? Depending on that factor, that will then influence whether you can capture 5% of that market, or you're going to capture 10% or 15, 20, etc. So with task management software, I guess just from what I know, that there's quite a lot of players out there in this space. Obviously, there's big ones like Trello or Asana, but there's many other smaller niche players as well. So that's why I thought that 5% might be a reasonable amount to say you can capture of the market. What you can capture also assumes, depending on your audience, will assume that you have investors. So it's with the right, with the right investors and the right capital and funding, I should be able to get 5% of the market. So does that make sense? Actually, one more thing, just to make it a little more concrete. So if you're looking at a very mature market that's been around a long time, then you're probably not going to be able to capture as much as if you're in a new hot growing market. So for example, if I was entering into the like the soda pop business and I'm competing against Coke and Pepsi, then I'd likely choose a smaller percentage for my SOM, as opposed to if I'm entering in using AI for drug discovery in the healthcare market. That's an evolving field. I would pick a higher percentage that I can capture there because it's changing and companies are evaluating new solutions. Okay. Judy, with any other questions from Slido?
Yeah, they're asking just one more that popped up. When you're estimating the market share, are you estimating in terms of current state, just starting, or as a mature company in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for SOM, I'm estimating in terms of what can I capture in the next 5 years. So I'm estimating the future state. So taking it back to the audience, right? So the reason we're creating a TAM-SAM SOM might be for investors who want to invest in the company and they want to know how much is your company going to grow to over the next 5 to 10 years so I can cash out and hopefully get some good returns in my investment. So you want to be calculating for future state. That's why I keep capturing things like the growth rate and how much the market is projected to grow into 2026 is a good idea. Actually, and I noticed as well, I didn't factor that in here, but when you do go through your analysis, what you want to do is factor in the growth rate and then use that to also reflect that in your SOM. Cool. All right, let's do the bottoms up market sizing now. What I'm included here in the slide is what I did for my company that I founded. And what I did here is essentially, I looked at the total number of companies in my customer base. I segmented them into pharma companies, biotech companies, and academic institutions. So I was talking to research labs, essentially. And with those 3 different segments, I then asked, how much do you currently spend on solving this problem of data analysis? The figure I got from there was roughly 18K per employee. And then I looked at, okay, so on average, how many employees does each lab have? 10. And that means the total savings or total spending, sorry, the total savings is 180K. And then I took a 33% revenue recoup rate. So as in, if using the solution will save the company 187K, we're only going to capture a smaller percentage of that value. So I took it as a 1/3, and I said, okay, so then the revenue that we can get per company, if we look at labs with 10 employees, that we can get roughly 61K per lab. I then multiplied that by the 30,000 or so different companies that I was going after, and that's how I got to the $1.9 billion market size, bottoms up. So let's try and apply the same thing to the task management industry and see how we get on. So a good way to, well, the best way to figure out how much people spend on task management software is asking them. So I'll start with that. Does anyone pay for any task management software like Trello or Asana or Jira or whatever else? And you might not because you're still in school. Actually, John, what?
You count Slack?
We can count it for this exercise, sure. How much does Slack cost?
It's around $6.99 per user per month.
Okay, cool.
That's
so
like $1.50 if you're a nonprofit, and that's what I use.
$1.50. Nice. That's a good deal. Okay, we'll do the $6.99. So $7 a month. There's 12 months in a year, so $84 a year. By the way, all these figures should be annual for your market sizing. So yeah, okay, per year. Okay, and then number of customers. So we need to estimate how many customers there are for task management, which obviously it seems like, how do I figure that out? Because it's a big question. This is the way I go about it. Well, looking at the fact that we're targeting small companies, I would start by just Googling how many small businesses, sure, how many small businesses in Canada? As of December 2019, there is 1.2 million small businesses. What I want to see is if it tells us how many employees, if there's a breakdown of employees, because if there's only one employee in the small business, there's no need for task management software. But if there's 20 or 30 or above, then there is. So let's see if it tells us. There we go. Okay. So 1.2 million here. So I want to take the ones that are 20 and above. So we have 100,000, we'll call it 35,000. So 135,000 here. So 135,000 is what we'll use, because we have 100,000 in the 20 to 49 category, and we have 35,000 in the 50 to 99 category. So 135,000. And that's it. So 135,000, and we multiply it out by 84.
Actually, Hirsch, that's a per user number.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. That's a good point. So then what I would do there is I would divide it by how many users we think a company would buy for task management. So if there's, right, per year per user. So there's 125,000 companies 1 second. So 11 million spent, or 11.3 million spent. 11.3 million per company. No, sorry, 3 million multiplied by, let's call it, I want to figure out like what's an average number of employees that we want to look at. So we went 20 to 99. So 20, just say times 50, let's say there's 50 accounts per company, and that will give us, 50 users per company, and that will give us what the total spend is. $565 million. And that's essentially how you get your bottoms up market size. So you want to know the spending per company or per user. Then you want to know how many users. In this case, we took $84 per user. We said there's 50 users per company. So I could have just done it like taking that and then multiply that by the number of companies, which is 135,000, and then we get to the 565 million. All right. Any questions about the bottoms up market sizing?
There are a few questions. I don't know if we want to save them for the end. Some of them we have already answered. For example, one of the questions here is, how did you come up with the market split between small, large companies? Can you estimate based on, say, number of small, medium businesses in North America, which we did kind of touch on in the Stats Canada chart. So then there is another question. When you do market sizing, how do you know which market demographic to explore, such as Canada versus NA versus global?
Sure. I would start with figuring out, well, which market do you want to sell your product to first, and that will drive the answer. So we used Canada in this example. You could use the US. The US will be roughly 10 times the size of Canada in terms of market size, so we could always just do that. But yeah, you want to use, for this bottoms up, it makes sense to get a realistic figure. You want to use whatever market size whatever market you intend on moving into in the first few years of your business. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. We can move on.
Okay, sounds good. So next up, we'll look at value analysis. So unlike the first two exercises, which is way more, I would say, like quick and dirty and estimates based, we're going to spend more time on value analysis, because this is where you get some really crucial insights for thinking about how your buyer goes through the decision-making process of choosing one vendor over another. The process I used when founding the company was essentially talking to customers and understanding the value they're trying to gain from data analysis software when they're evaluating competitors against each other. And I asked them essentially to list off their buying criteria. Like, what are the things you look at when considering one tool over another? Or I would ask them, what is it about this one tool that made you choose it over another tool? So as mentioned in the previous talks as well, you want to try and ask them about what they've done in the past, not what they do in theory. So the customers you want to talk to are people who are already using tools out there. So for our example, to make it super concrete, we talked to scientists in labs, and they were using predominantly Excel or Prism, which are the two things here down in the bottom right. And I would ask them, so why did you choose Prism over Excel or vice versa? And them telling me what it is about Excel or what it is about Prism that made them choose it is what then led me to understand across a bunch of different users that it was whether or not they needed to process big data or small data. That would then influence the type of tool they used. And then also their level of proficiency with coding. Like, how good are they at coding? If they're a computer science background, they would tend to lean more to using something like RStudio. And if they didn't know how to code, which many wet lab scientists don't, they would use something like Excel or KNIME. So that was how I kind of developed the two axes of which to evaluate our tool against. And we thought about how we want to be best in class. And where we wanted to be best in class was that our tool would allow you to handle really big data and analyze that, but without having to code at all. So that's how we differentiated ourselves from our competition. And that's through our customer interviews, we discovered that that would lead them to adopt a tool like ours. So you want to try and go through the same exercise with what you're doing. Let's do it quickly now for the task management software side. So John, I'm going to pick on you again. Why did you, so we were talking earlier about Slack and Discord, right? So what were the two things that made you choose Discord over using Slack for the product management group?
Yeah, the first one had to do with the ease of collaboration.
Okay.
The second one had to do with versatility when it came to like the ability to make bots and customize the server to our purposes.
Cool. Let's say we'll call it customization. Right. And then now what I would do next is let's research, well, who are the different vendors in this space. So task management software.
Oh, looks like we had a question from Jay Shelley, if you want to unmute.
Sure. Yeah.
I just had a question about this graph. So from previous like pitch events, a lot of times the feedback you get is you're kind of just like making it up. You know, it's kind of like you're choosing the best two and you're putting yourself in the top. How do you legitimize that a bit more? And what's the process for doing that? Because yeah.
How do you legitimize it? Is that the question?
Yeah, I guess because a lot of the feedback that I've seen from various other judges is like, of course you're going to put yours in the top right or something like that, you know?
Yep.
So yeah,
it's true.
Just a thought. Like, how do you? Yeah.
We got the same question actually, and so the way we thought about it was, we thought about it like the reason that we're in the top right here is because we are differentiating ourselves on what we've discovered are the two most important factors that our segment of users want to use when evaluating which tool to use. So that's essentially why we're in the top right. And through our customer discovery and talking to customers, that's how we legitimized that fact, essentially. Another way of thinking about it could be the reason that you're going after this segment of users is because they're interested in solving their problem along the lines of what your tool is solving their problem like, and that they're not happy with the existing solutions. And that's why they're looking for a new solution, and that's why you think you can capture their business. So if they were happy with the existing solutions, they would essentially end up looking better on a graph like this. Or alternatively, if you compare yourself on the things that your competitors do well on, what you're saying is then that you're going to go after the exact same customers who care about the exact same things that your competitors do, and that therefore your tool would end up looking something very similar to one of your competitors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
For sure. There's one other thing I wanted to say. Yes, so there's other matrices as well. Like you could have a matrix similar to like the way Gartner does it. So I'll show you what that looks like.
The 4 quadrant?
Yeah, the 4 quadrants, exactly. And that's another way of doing it. But then if you look at the matrix like this, which you can consider more legitimate, you're always going to be in the top left. Like if you're entering a new market, you're never going to be the leader. So how much information does that really contribute when you're pitching yourself, kind of thing? But yeah, that's a great question. Actually, yeah, it took me a little while to think about how to answer it. But yeah, it's one we got before as well when we were pitching our startup. So great question. Okay, looking at task management software, I was pulling up a list of task management software. Cool. And I'll just pull a couple logos for this exercise. Proof hub. Okay, let's take this. Now, what I would normally do is I would go to their websites. Sorry, 1 second here. Figure out where to put them on this. What I would do is I would go to their website and evaluate. That's weird. Oh, I guess they went right to the try part of their website. Okay, let's see.
It seems like the number one was their own website. They ranked themselves one.
Wait, was this? Yeah, okay. I didn't even look at the title of this review. I thought it was a review site. That's funny. Very clever of them. Okay, and so what I want to do is like I'll look at their features and understand like how well are they doing in terms of collaboration. See if they talk about it on their website and if it's included in like their benefits. I'll be lazy and just literally collaborate notes. Okay, so let's call it that they're sort of like in the middle on collaboration, but not super high. And the other one that we mentioned was like Discord, and I'll pull an image for that. And so based on what John said, and if anyone disagrees with him, like shout it out, but he said that they're really good at collaboration and customization, right? So I would do the same exercise for all the other competitors in my space, and hence being able to produce something like this. And just to quickly show you, yeah, I would go through each of their features and kind of figure out how well it contributes to them being either good on collaboration or good on versatility by going through their feature page. The other resource, which is really good, which I think you guys could try using in the competition weekend, is looking at comparison websites. So I think it's Capterra, if I'm not wrong. Right, Capterra. This was super useful. So for understanding how people think about different software solutions and how they evaluate them against each other. So let this load. Cool, right? So buyer's guide. So here they have, like, as we can see, this 505 different products in task management. So you can narrow it down by certain categories. But let's go look at what I always do is look at the reviews. So let's look at these reviews of Monday.com. So I look at the user reviews. And what's especially important to consider when looking at these user reviews is their alternatives considered. So you can begin to understand, how does the customer view this task management software, or rather, how does the customer view the problem of task management or the opportunity of task management? And then what kind of alternatives do they consider in their mind when evaluating great task management software? So here we see that their reason for choosing Monday.com is that it was more responsive on sales and allowed us several weeks to test it out. So they liked the free trial ability, fell in love with how easy it was to manage and implement. So these are some of the keywords that you can almost think of going into the different axes here. Because if we go ahead and look at, let's say we go ahead and look at like a sample of 10 reviews on this page, and the words like easy to implement keep coming up over and over again, then you can know that tells me that that's an important thing to consider. It is an important thing to consider that buyers look at when choosing a tool. And then I would put that on this axis, like easy to implement. Any more questions about value analysis?
Yes, we have one on Slido here. How do you choose the most honest axes for the 2x2? How can you make sure you're not self-validating?
Definitely. Yeah. And actually, so that is exactly why the best thing to do is look at the reviews of your competitors and see what people care about when choosing one of your competitors. Now, you want to do this obviously then across, let's say, 3 or 4 different competitors, and see what kept coming up constantly is people's reason for choosing their competitor. That tells you what they care about in the buying process. So you can look at the reasons for choosing, the reasons for switching away, and that's how you can choose what to put on those axes. Essentially, it's like the benefits that the user gets from your software. So yeah, whichever ones come up the most frequently, that should be the thing that goes on axis 1, and then axis 2 will be the second most frequent reason people choose the software.
Thank you. We can move on to the next part.
Sounds good. Okay, so the last thing we want to produce is feature level analysis. So comparing to the previous section where we looked at the benefits, like what the user cares about, such as like something being easy to implement or having great collaboration or versatility, feature level analysis is going to help you concretely figure out what your roadmap should be initially. And what you're trying to do is understand who your main competitors are, which features they have, and then which of those features are going to be like table stakes for you, like which of those features do you have to include in your software versus which features are optional, or which features can you use to differentiate yourself from your competitors. So I'll quickly zoom in here and show you what I did. This is for one of my previous consulting clients that I worked on. What I'd done is I was working on a chatbot management platform. So it was like software that big enterprises would use to manage all their chatbots for like customer support or customer service. Oftentimes these large enterprises like HSBC, for example, might have 4 different chatbots or 5 different chatbots employed in their company. One for customer support, one for sales, one for marketing, one for account management, whatever it may be. So that's why they're using the software. And what I then did is I looked at the features that this software had. It was called EBM, stood for Enterprise Bot Manager. I looked at the features that EBM had and listed them out here in the columns. And then I looked at all the competitors for EBM, Chatbase, Accuvate, BotCore, Twilio, Autopilot, Watson Assistant, and ranked them on a scale of, I think it was 1 to 5, right? Yeah, 1 to 5 on how effective their feature was. Now, like the way I went about this essentially was trying out some of their software or watching video tutorials or reading their product how-tos. In some cases, when that stuff wasn't available, all I had to go off of was how they described their feature on their website. So I would just look at their website and see like how much attention do they pay to this feature on their website. If that feature is like the first thing in the feature section, then I know it's really important and they've invested a lot of time into it. So I'm going to rank it highly. I also then looked at things like Capterra as well to see if that feature was one of the reasons that someone had chosen their software. If it was, then that would contribute to me ranking it higher too. But anyway, so as you can see, like this exercise took quite a long time because there's many different features to consider, and then many different competitors to consider, and then for each competitor, doing quite a bit of research and understanding like how effective is that feature, and then using it and then ranking it from 0 to 5 based on my understanding of the feature and how much existing customers liked it. When you do all that, then you can sum it up and you'll get a score. And what that'll tell you is for the features, well, essentially the score tells you like if they're high scoring, that means they're doing well in these features, and low score means they're not doing so well. So we'll try and do something really quick for the task management software. So let's use monday.com and let's see what type of features they have. I was expecting to see like a features page, but they don't have that. This is a different flow. Huh, interesting. So they put you right in the product itself. That's pretty cool. I guess they figured that you can find the features by just trying it. Very cool. Very low friction, but not useful for my exercise. So we're going to try a different software. Let's try Asana. Hopefully they don't have such a smooth, frictionless onboarding. All right. All right. Reporting. Cool. So they have a feature that lets you set goals. Let's do that. By the way, this is features. We'll call it, let's just use Jira. I'm pretty familiar with that. So set goals, Asana. Okay, let's see what they tell about it. Okay, so yeah, essentially like I will go through, look at their documentation, understand like how much effort do they put into it. Looks like they do quite a lot actually. This is great. How do you set and track goals? So that feature, okay. Yeah, so anyways, going through understanding how the feature works. Let's say that it works really well, so I'll give it a 5 out of 5 here. Jira, I've used it before. Their goal setting is decent, but looks like they don't put as much effort into it as Asana. I'll give it a 3. Then I'll go through and do the same thing for another feature, whatever it may be, and we would get different numbers there. So essentially that's how you do this process. Let me pause here and ask, do you guys have any questions about the feature matrix, the feature table?
We actually had a great question in the chat from Stanford. It wasn't necessarily about the feature table, but it was about competitor analysis in general. Stanford,
Sure.
if you want to ask that.
Yeah, sure. So my question is, how do you find competitors if you're having trouble finding them? And also, how would you perform the same analysis without competitors? Like, how would you go about doing that?
Cool. But yeah, so let's help me understand. So why is it that it's hard to find competitors right now? Like, tell me a little bit, give me some more context.
Sure. So like we're having trouble like finding a product that does the exact same thing that we're trying to do. There are similar products, but they don't do exact, like they don't do like essentially we're doing like a credit card aggregator, like optimizer. And so we're there are like recommendation tools, but there's nothing that's out there that we found that really gets down to like the detailed like transaction by transaction basis to optimize transactions. So we're having trouble, like where do we start in terms of, you know?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd ask is, so what benefit or what, are you familiar with jobs to be done? That term?
No.
Okay. Why would a customer use a credit card aggregator? Like what problem is it solving for the customer?
And so they have too many credit cards and they don't know which one to choose.
In term, okay, wait, to choose, like to
when they buy, sign up, and or also like when they want to make a purchase.
Okay, cool. So what you want to understand, so let's see. So too many credit cards trying to choose between them. And why are they trying to choose between them? Is it because they want to
get the most cash back?
Cool. Okay. Now this is helping me understand it better. So that's where you would look for competitors. So you want to try and find how else are people figuring out ways to get cash back on their purchases. And that could be, those companies that are helping them do that are essentially your competitors. So to step back for a second, competitors aren't always going to be doing the exact same thing as you. Instead, there's what you really focus on is how else are my customers currently solving this problem or getting this need met? And the things that they currently use to get that need met, those things are your competitors. So in this example, it may be, is it like honey, I think?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can use honey as a kind of the same methodology, I guess, of same mission. Yeah.
Right. There's
saving people
honey.
money.
There's like, and then people might use I don't know, coupons of some sorts or other types of discount codes. And essentially that's what you're competing with for that spend by your customer, or like that effort or that mind share, if you want to think about it that way. So when someone thinks about getting some money back on their purchases, what are the things that they think of? Those things that they think of are essentially your competitors. They might think of, for example, using a price comparison site, or like a hotels.com, for example, like figuring out which hotels cost the least. That is essentially what you're competing with as well. So that's how you find your competitors. You find your competitors by asking yourself, I use the term job to be done. Like it's a pretty good framework to look into. It's what we use to describe like what is it that your customers are hiring your product to solve for them. That thing that they're trying to get solved, that is their job to be done. And it's that job to be done that will have many different competitors competing for that. So let me give another example, like Uber, for example. I want to get from point A to point B. So my job to be done is like getting from point A to point B. And the things that are competing with Uber are like me walking, biking, taking a taxi, taking a bus, using my own car, or taking an Uber. So Uber is competing with all those different options. Now, as you get more specific as well, then you can get into, okay, Uber's also competing with Lyft, but that's just one of the things that it's competing with. It's also competing with whatever else I think of to solve the same job to be done or to solve that same problem.
See, so kind of like look at it from an industry perspective, like what other things are kind of doing the same industry, and then narrow down from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
That's a great question. Yeah.
I actually wanted to add another product that I have seen, which is similar. It's called Cred. They basically give you cash back on your credit cards. So like they incentivize you to pay your bill using their platform, and you get more rewards based on that. So just thought I'll throw that out there for you, Stanford.
Thank you.
That's sweet. What other questions do we have? Oh, I can check the chat.
I think in terms of questions on this particular framework, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. So that's the end of it essentially. So my takeaways, I think, are, let me clean this up a little bit. The takeaways, I think, from this session is that I know you guys are creating a pitch for tomorrow. So in the pitch, I think likely you're going to want to include something like TAM, SAM, SOM for market sizing. You're also going to want to include, I'm not sure actually here. You can let me know if I'm wrong here, John, but some like bottoms up analysis as well. Figuring out how much your customers are spending to solve the problem, and then figuring out how many customers they are in that segment and multiplying that. Perhaps you want to showcase how you fit into a market by comparing yourself to the competitors along a couple of dimensions which are meaningful to your segment when they're evaluating what to buy. Essentially showcasing how you differentiate your product. And then finally, you want to help inform your first roadmap by looking at your competitors' features and seeing which of them that they do well in. And what this will unveil to you is which features you have to really build and which ones you can differentiate yourself in. The ones that you have to build, I often call like table stakes features, and the ones that you can differentiate yourself in are like the delighters, or like features that make you talk about a product. So really quickly, for example, like Netflix's like table stake features is that you can stream videos, but what is delightful or differentiated about Netflix is that it makes great recommendations. So I don't have to find the movies myself. It'll tell me what I should watch based on my interests. So you want to try and figure out something similar for your product. Cool. Yeah, and that's the session. Thanks for joining me today, guys. And hopefully this was super useful and you'll be able to apply it in what you're doing this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hirsch. That was a fantastic workshop. Everyone stick around if you want, because we'll be going over a few more questions. So there are a few popping up that were more about the whole workshop on our Slido. But we can formally end the session there. And if y'all want, you can definitely stick around, because I think I'm very curious about some of these as well.
Yeah, can I get that Slido link? Let me see what these questions are.
Absolutely. 1 second.
Maybe it's up here. Yeah, got it.
You got it? Okay, sweet. The first question is, the top voted one is, what are the different use cases for top down and bottom up market sizing? Like, what are the benefits of each one?
Sure. Okay. Good question. So top down market sizing is good for, I'll call it like the quicker and easier way to figure out what the market size is. Bottoms up, you're going to get that information only when you begin talking to customers and understanding what they spend. Your top down market sizing might likely be bigger. You'll get a bigger figure, and then bottoms up will be smaller, and you can use it to sense check each other.
Awesome. So I think we did answer the second question that's on there. I guess a question, we can move on to the next upvoted one is, should you have market sizings representing different phases for your product, or is it best to just use, this framework as a snapshot of your product's current competitive landscape?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like
yeah, exactly. So this is where TAM, SAM, and SOM come into play. So what won't really change, because it's based on external factors, is your TAM, like the total addressable market. Let me pull up the slide so it's clear. Right. So what's not going to change is TAM, because that's based on the amount of like customers out there solving a problem. What will flex then is your SAM, which is the market segment that you target. So let's say the first version, Uber's another good example of this actually. So Uber's TAM is like transportation in general. And then their SAM with Uber itself was just people taking a car, hiring a car for a short period of time to get from point A to point B, likely within cities. So that was SAM. But then now Uber has like Uber Eats, and it has a bunch of other stuff. When it adds Uber Eats, it's now expanded its SAM, because it's now providing additional use cases and solving for those. So that's essentially, to sum it up, your different market size, well, your market size should be TAM fixed. SAM will be, I would say, like the first 3 to 5 years of your product. And then you can expand that SAM as you develop additional functionality to get into different markets, or rather to capture more of that existing market. All right. I can go through the next question. Should you think of your SOM as your long-term target, or is it the goal for the end of your first year? Cool. Right. So SOM is, I did it for the best way. Okay. So I did it based on funding round, actually. So whether or not it's a long-term target will depend on how frequently you think you'll fund. But it all comes back to the actual user of this, or the audience. So if your audience is angel investors, they want to know what your SOM will be, what their investment will get in terms of SOM, in terms of the value. And then let's say you then go on to your Series A round later on, your SOM will have changed, because those investors want to see that, well, number one, that it's bigger, but yeah, that it changes, because your SOM is dependent on like, how much investment do I think I'm going to get? Based on that, how much market share am I going to capture? So yeah.
Awesome. I think maybe we can cap off with one last question. I thought this was kind of funny.
Sure.
How many 2x2s is too many 2x2s?
That's so true. There's a lot of 2x2s. Yeah, you could definitely you could go nuts. You could go nuts with the axes. I don't know how many 2x2s you're including in your deck, but I only had this competitive analysis matrix 2x2. So yeah, I would keep it to 1 if you can.
I see. And then the remainder of like the important features or important value props you can throw into your feature comparison or something like a grid rather than doing just a 2x2.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yep. Because there's you want to get more information in here. The 2x2, like, what's great is that it's
visual, whereas
it's
other ones more data.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I think we have to close off there because we need to let these guys get to their lunch break. But yeah, join me in thanking Hirsch again. Thank you so much for this well-prepared workshop. It was very engaging.
Sure.
And I learned a ton too. And yeah, for competitors, thank y'all for joining us. Go enjoy your break. As Scott mentioned in announcements, putting work down for a moment and coming back to it could give you that, that eureka moment that you really need to break through in the competition. And we'll see you all back at 2 p.m. when work session starts. And I believe mentor sessions start at 2:30 today. So see y'all then.
Good luck with the competition, guys. Thanks for joining. Have a good lunch. Bye.
If you could stick around for just a second.
Oh, sure. I'll stick around.